I had I would say, advantage of being raised in wisdom. I was really young, but because they were so old and my grandfather and I were really close, that I just got imparted with a lot of wisdom at a really young age. And so I never felt, I hate to say, but I never felt peer pressured. I never felt a sense of needing to belong. He instilled with me a sense of self, and I was just really confident about where I came. I always knew I had an anchor. I had somewhere to be and somewhere to go. And so I just didn't get fazed by much. And in many ways, I feel like that is also just God's grace that allowed me to navigate that aspect of my life. There's no explanation for it other than literally just the grace and favor of God that I was able to kind of maneuver that. And so, yeah, I went into places and spaces like, this is me. I just show up. Here I am. And, I've always believed that I'm enough. I mean, I have insecurities, don't get me wrong, but in general, I take chances because what's the worst that can happen? If somebody said no, they would have said no if I didn't ask. So, I'm in the same position I was in had I not asked.
Elaine Mensah is no doubt one of my favorite people on the planet. For well over a decade, Elaine has established herself as one of the industry's go-to brand strategists and a stern advocate for bringing African fashion and luxury brands to the global stage. She created Showroom, etc. to do just that. As CEO, her company represents brands like my personal favorite, Christie Brown in Ghana, Pepper Row, and Pastis. And she also works with brands like L'Oreal, Netflix, Stars, and HBO, to name a few. When she's not behind the scenes, she's moderating conversations spanning from fashion and beauty to business and entrepreneurship. But what I love the most about Elaine is her openness, humility, and dedication to helping others. Check out our conversation. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
There she is. You look fabulous. Oh my God. I'm good. I am so good. And I'm just so honored that you're on the show. I am thrilled.
Are you kidding? I'm the one that's honored. I made it to a fashion moment.
Get out of here. Get out of here. Well, welcome to the show, Elaine.
Thank you.
Are you wearing one of your designers, by the way?
I'm not.
I mean, I'm wearing Mexico set. I know I'm saying it incorrectly. How do I say it? It's Mex.
Yeah, there's a little click on his head. I never get it right.
I'm gonna keep trying. No,
the struggle is real.
Yay! Well, I can't wait to delve into your illustrious life. Yes. So I always love to start from the beginning. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? But also, where did your love for fashion originate? Like, when did it begin?
Yeah. So I am first generation American. I was born right here in Washington, D.C. But my parents are originally from Ghana. And so I was super blessed to have an opportunity to live in Ghana I lived in Ghana from 8 to 16. So I was there for 8 years. Yeah. And I would I'd come back to the States for, summer breaks and stuff like that because my mom was here, but my dad moved back. My dad used to work at the Smithsonian. He was there for
so chic. I can't with you.
Years, maybe more. Yeah, and so when he retired, he decided he was going to move back because at that point he got appointed at the African Development Bank in Ivory Coast, and so decided he wanted us to move back. So I lived in Ivory Coast for 2 years.
Côte d'Ivoire.
For 8 years. So I was on the continent. for 10 years, which was phenomenal because it was, the years that count, 6 to 16, essentially. I would come here for summer breaks because my mom was still living here, even though my dad was over there. And so the great thing is I learned the language. I got to bond with my family on the continent. And it always allowed me to feel like I have one foot on each side. And so I came back at 16 and I came back to high school, to senior year of high school, which has its own challenges, but coming back, with really just a year before I went to college, I think it was a blessing in many ways because I didn't have the need to build relationships in high school. In my mind, I'm only here for 9 months, really, and I'm off to college. And so, it was great. I mean, I was here in Virginia, so I went to high school at T.C. Williams, and I was really fortunate that the teachers that I had were really helpful and really instrumental in getting me comfortable with certain things. But what I also found a deep appreciation for was the education system in Ghana, because I knew how hard we worked to be able to get certain things. And I went to a great school. I went to a private school, and so it wasn't for lack of, but the disparity was clear. And I always used to find it so interesting that, American kids hated school.
I loved it. I was like, give me a book, give me something to read.
Or well, I shouldn't say all American kids, but specifically at my high school. And I would just sit there and think, well, my friends really good to be here. Like, I'm trying to understand, we have free facilities and we have, books. And again, I went to a really great school in Ghana. So it's not to say, we didn't have or anything like that, but the disparity is what it is. And just understanding the opportunity. And I think that really shaped for me my perspective on how I chose to live in America. Because at that point, I wasn't, for lack of a better term, really introduced to race. Like, race for me is an American construct. Not to say it doesn't, I shouldn't say race, racism, in the way we experience
girl, you grew up on the continent. I'm like, what I wouldn't give.
It's one of those things where my blackness was never in question, right? And so again, those are really pivotal years. The 6 to 16, that's identity years. And so I find myself, I always say I was super blessed because I got to grow up where everybody was Black and being Black wasn't a thing. I mean, I didn't really truly understand the concept of being Black until I came back. And even then, it took me a while to understand, like, if somebody says, oh, you're Black, like that meant something. For me, it's like, oh yeah, ignorance is bliss, isn't it? But I learned quickly. And I went to college at American University, which is a predominantly white institution, but it was phenomenal for me because it was how I was used to, growing up, and I didn't think much of it. Otherwise, it had a huge international population, which was great. And I got to meet a lot of people, which was amazing. And when I left, I went and got my master's at Georgetown, and I decided that I wanted to kind of be one and done. And when I was done with school, I was done with it. But I genuinely was not one of those people who always knew what I wanted to do. If anything, all I knew was that I wanted to do interesting work, and I wanted to be able to be creative. And, this is 2001, 2002.
Wow.
A creative was not a word. That was not a thing at that time. And so I didn't even know what that was or what that meant. I just knew that I wanted the ability to do different things all the time. And so I got into consulting.
I got to pause for a second, though. Your travels, just throughout the continent, growing up there, and then coming to the West, like, were there certain style adjustments that you made? Were there certain things in your closet, or just, from the culture that you wanted to preserve and keep? Like, was it sort of like a blend? Like, how did that work?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's actually a great question, because in hindsight, I should have appreciated culture more. No, we were fully Western. Like, we were all about, we wanted to, and like I said, I would come over the summer. So it's like you come and you get the flyest gear and like the new this and the new that. Like we did all of that. Like me and my friends, we did the Kanais and we did, you know, and we did the Filas, and we were big on the, you know, the Versace's, if you will, with the little chokers. Remember when chokers were a thing? We did the jelly shoes. Oh, we did it. Oh yeah, we did it all. The A-line skirts. I remember when A-lines came in, and my cousin had one, and she had an extra one, and we were going to this like party, and I had on this. I would never forget. There was white T-shirt with the smiley face on it.
For the rage, I remember.
Listen, with the A-line denim skirt with boots and some socks.
You had your booty showing in the skirt. Uh-oh.
Well, it wasn't that short, but it was short enough. And I promise you, we thought we were doing something. Like, it was everything. And I remember in high school, so we went to boarding school. So we started boarding school fairly early in Ghana. And on Sundays, you had to wear traditional clothing. And what we would do is we would take, because who knew, right? We would take the fabric and we would sew modern styles. Wow. So I remember like my Sunday traditional was like this sleeveless shirt dress type, but you had to wear what's called a slit, which would be like a long skirt. And so, but then I would put my slit in the back and not on the side, because the side is the traditional way, but I put my slit on the back. Listen. And yeah, we used to, and we didn't know at the time, right, that we were really modernizing the way we wear traditional dress. All we knew is we didn't want to wear what our parents were wearing, because to us that felt old, right? And so today, when I see kind of that peplum shirt with the poof sleeves, you can pay us to wear that. Back when we were kids. Oh no, like what? Or when we did have to wear it, it was like, oh my God,
like weddings,
I have to wear this like today.
More formal occasions.
Like events, you know, things like that. And so slowly we'd go, because everything for the most part on the continent until fairly recently, and I'll specify Ghana because that's where I lived most of my life. It was tailored, like everything was custom, right? And so you don't go to a store to buy clothes, you go to a tailor to make you clothes. There's a tailor or a seamstress.
Similar to India in a way. Like, so
yes, very much so. And so you get your fabric, you go to the tailor or the seamstress, you give them your style, you know, and they make it for you. So yeah, that was really interesting. So when I moved back, it was an interesting transition, because believe it or not, I was very much a tomboy growing up. Like my mother, so my family is a fashion family. Like my mom went to millinery school. My aunt makes wedding dresses. Like every woman in my family sews. Like my aunt's wedding, like everybody made stuff. They're big. Yeah. I mean, what they today would be described as like a lifestyle type family, right? From cooking to baking to, you know, designing clothes to hats to florals. My mom would make accessories. My cousin went into the accessory business, and then into the clothing business. So it's like, it's a family business. I remember my mom bought me this cute little Gucci purse when I was young. And I was like, I didn't know what that was. And it was the double G. It was like a navy, you know, that navy and gray, super classic. A cute little one with a long strap. And every time we would go out, she'd say, take your pocketbook. And I'm like,
wow.
Do I have to carry this thing? Why? I hated it. I didn't want to wear earrings. I wanted to be comfortable. I hated, and I think I went through cycles, because my mom tells stories about me as a kid. I would only wear a skirt and tights, like, and dresses. And then I grew out of that. And so, yeah, by the time I came back, I was 16 years old, in a new environment in many ways. And I wanted to fit in, but at the same time, I was comfortable enough in my own skin where I was like, I just want to be comfortable. And that's really the way I still dress today. I like interesting things, but
100%.
Comfort is king.
100%.
Yes.
He said at all times. So, you know, just really quickly about just, you know, being comfortable in your own skin. Do you think that your time living in Ghana really helped with that?
Yes, very much so. Very much so. I mean, I was fortunate. I lived with my grandparents. And so in many ways, I was baby number 11. My grandparents had 10 kids. I was baby number 11, but I was baby number 11 to like 60-year-olds, right? My grandmother is 91. Wow. Now my grandfather passed 15 years ago, actually. Is today the 6th or the 5th?
Wow.
15 years ago tomorrow. He passed on February 6th in 2006. Wow. Yeah. And so I had I would say, advantage of being raised in wisdom. I was really young, but because they were so old and my grandfather and I were really close, that I just got imparted with a lot of wisdom at a really young age. And so I never felt, I mean, I hate to say, but I never felt peer pressured. I never felt a sense of needing to belong. He instilled with me a sense of self, and I was just really confident about where I came. I always knew I had an anchor. I had somewhere to be and somewhere to go. And so I just didn't get fazed by much. And in many ways, I feel like that is also just God's grace that allowed me to navigate that aspect of my life. There's no explanation for it other than literally just the grace and favor of God that I was able to kind of maneuver that. And so, yeah, I went into places and spaces like, this is me.
Wow.
I just show up.
Wow.
Here I am. And, you know, I've always believed that I'm enough. I mean, I have insecurities, don't get me wrong, but in general, I take chances because what's the worst that can happen? I mean, if somebody said no, they would have said no if I didn't ask. So, you know, I'm in the same position I was in had I not asked. And so that's just my perspective. And I kind of adopted that really early. And so I took chances. I remember when I was in college getting ready to graduate and I thought about, okay, what do I want for my future? I was always a strategic thinker. And so I would say, okay, I don't know exactly what I want to do, but what companies do I want to work for that would be really great on my resume? Because then I can leverage my experience from the business that I've been in, right? Or the companies that I've worked for. And so I always thought in those terms, just what makes the most sense and how can I navigate. And once I'm there, what can I learn to then take to the next place?
So many nuggets of wisdom there. In general, so many nuggets. There will be lots of show notes. So you graduate from college. Like, how did you end up transitioning into branding and, you know, fashion? And I mean, you know, I don't want to offend anyone, but I mean, you're like the queen of fashion in DC. I mean, you were advocating.
That is a way. That's
when I first moved, let me tell y'all, like, Elaine was doing all the, you know, all of the fashion events. She was, you know, moderating. She was running the fashion group international DC. I mean, anything attached to fashion in DC, you were there. And then you also did the documentary, you know, The Politics of Fashion with the great Robin Givon and others. But it just, I mean, how did all of that transpire?
Yeah, you know, I in 2006, roughly, 2005, 2006. Well, when I graduated college, I just jumped around for about 4 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And in 2005, this was 2005. In 2005, I remember telling my boyfriend at the time, now husband, that consulting wasn't what I thought it was going to be. But beyond that, I was like, I want to live in color. I remember saying that, like, I want to live in color, you know, the gray walls of my cube. And it just, when I go to work every day, it just felt gray. And I remember just saying, I want to live in color. I don't know what that means. I don't know how that will happen. And at the time, I used to love People Magazine.
I still love People.
Listen, People Magazine and E-News.
Us Weekly.
Were it for me.
Quick read.
All of it, right? And I remember I used to pore over them, not the gossip kind of celebrity news component, although I did enjoy that, but I found that I gravitated towards what I call the business of fashion, right? Like colors and trends and who was doing what. And I always, at that point, I didn't know what it was, but I just knew that I enjoyed it. And so I was complaining to my husband that, I don't know what I want to do. And this is not what I like. And he's like, well, why don't you do what you spend most of your time doing outside of work? And I was like, well, what does that mean? He's like, well, you're always, watching E-News or reading some magazine or something. You should do something like that. And it was just a passing comment. Like it was, but a light bulb went off. And I decided, because again, I'm a big kind of thinker. And so when he said that to me, what I heard was go create your own channel. So I decided I was going to create a channel, which was going to be like the E-News of DC. Now, the reason I settled on DC was because in 2006, I went and interned for Cynthia Rowley. Actually, I was looking for work to do in the fashion business. And of course, DC is not the fashion capital of the world. And there used to be a website called Fashion Job Central. Oh my gosh,
that's a throwback.
It was like a Craigslist fashion job. Do you hear me? I went to Fashion Job Central and there was some anonymous post from some designer who needed help for Fashion Week. And I saw Fashion Week and designer. I said, sign me up. And I reached out and it turned out to be Cynthia Rowley. And I went for an interview in New York. And I remember
she's kind. She's so kind.
The journey. I remember the PR director looked at me. She looked at me and then looked at me and was just like, this is an internship. Like at this point, mind you, I am a senior consultant working for a major company. Like I am further along in my career. I'm married at this point. I had a home. I mean, I wasn't your typical intern. And I said to her, I'm trying to transition from where I am to go into the fashion industry, but I am a big believer in starting at the bottom. I want to be able to understand all of the business. And I want to be able to know how to navigate that. And so I just want an opportunity to work for a brand and just really be able to understand what's going on. And she was like, okay, well, if you can make it here for 2 weeks, for the week prior to Fashion Week and then the week of the show, come on. And I was like, say no more. So I came back and I took 2 weeks off from work on vacation. And I had a girlfriend that lived in New York. So I lived with her. And I went out to New York and really the fashion journey began because at the time, Cynthia had all of her business in one building, in her downtown building. So production was in the basement, retail was on the main level, design was on the second level, and PR was on the third level. It was, I know for a fact Cynthia will not remember me because she saw me in passing a couple of times. But I don't think at the time, the PR director knew how big of an impact that was for me. Because for me, the opportunity to be fully immersed was incredibly important. And so I took my time there very seriously. And because I was older and because I was more mature, she would hand me the entire media list, like seating chart. And I was like, oh my God, I have Anna Wintour's email. Like I have everybody's email, right?
No, of course.
I never used it just especially at the time. But the access and the ability, the availability of information and just learning and understanding, positions and who gets what and what it really illuminated for me also was it's not that hard. Like, I can do this. Like, because sometimes you feel like there's something, magical behind. It's of course there's talent, there's experience, not to diminish any of that. But if you genuinely want to do this, then not having a fashion background or going to fashion school should not deter you. Creativity is what it is, and you can apply that across industries. And the biggest blessing for me is when I decided to transition into fashion, I actually applied to FIT. There was a program called Global Fashion Management, and I knew
so chic.
This was my end. It was one semester in Paris, one semester in New York. I knew that was it for me. This was going to be my end. I didn't get in. The lady at admissions was really kind. When I called, she said, we received 300 applicants. We have 33 slots.
I remember when that program launched too. And I was like, I can't afford this. I was like just starting out. And I was like, well, maybe one day.
Listen, I didn't even think about it. I was like, let me just get in and I'll figure the rest out. But it was the biggest blessing, because one of my biggest hangups and insecurities when I started in the business, and in some ways still exists sometimes, is that I don't come from a fashion background. And so I always used to joke and say, I didn't have an editor write my recommendation letter, or I didn't get introduced by this person or that person. But what I found later to be my plus was that because I didn't come from the cookie cutter model and having been trained by others as to what things should look like, I approached everything with fresh perspective. And so all my ideas were new ideas, were exciting, because I didn't do them the way they were supposed to be done. And that actually became an asset later in life. And so, I went from, I did that with Cynthia actually for 2 years. So 4 seasons. Yeah, I would go. And then in the process of that is when I decided I was going to stay in DC. And partly because I realized that I didn't want to live in New York unless I could live the lifestyle.
Amen to that.
Frankly, that I wanted to live. And I love DC. I love the balance of DC. I had a family. I didn't have kids at the time, but I just loved the balance that DC gave me. And New York was a hop, skip, and a jump away. And so at that point, I was like, I'm just going to stay here. But if I'm going to stay here and I want to work in fashion, that meant I had to create my own lane. So that's why I ended up creating my company in 2008. Not because I wanted to be an entrepreneur, but only because I wanted to stay in this city. And the only way I could do that was to carve out my own path.
I mean, that was I actually didn't know about your time at Cynthia Rowley. It's like I learned something new every day about you, but that is so important. If the person can afford it, like starting at the bottom and just sort of learning your way up. But I
stayed with friends.
Couch surfing.
No, trust me. The boss, the China boss, was my best friend.
$15?
Because at that time, I
can't remember. Before Megabus.
and then I couldn't figure out the New York train systems, and my friend lived, she was off on the 6th. So I would literally take the train all the way to the end of the station and then walk all the way to Soho, because I couldn't figure out stop and switch.
Your legs were like
by the time I was done, I was like, no, thank you. Let me set my little bougie behind
so funny.
in DC.
I cannot with you. So, you're in DC, you're creating your own lane. Back in 2008 or 2018, Capital File magazine recognized you as one of DC's most stylish influencers, changing the city's fashion scene. So, I mean, how did you personally know that you were making a difference? Like you were making an impact?
I did not. To be perfectly honest, I was really following, especially at that time, I was really just following my passion. I mean, I had a love for DC, and, you know, to put some context around this too, 2008, when I started my business, was the year of Obama. It was the year of hope. It was the, do you hear me? The energy in DC was like none other. I mean, I've lived here pretty much my whole life. I mean, now, especially, I've lived here longer than I've lived anywhere else. Right. And that energy, you could taste it. And there was something just so electric about the city, and lifestyle in particular was everywhere, like fashion, art, music.
Michelle Obama.
Oh my goodness, that energy was everything. And so I was really looking at DC through the lens of that. And then I was going to Fashion Week, and it was right before Bryant Park switched over to Lincoln Center. And so I remember being at Bryant Park the last season of the tents and just thinking, this would be so cool if we had something like this in DC. Like, DC is way more stylish than, you know, we give it credit for. And like, we all migrate to New York, but there's all these people who love fashion, who are super creative. And I had joined an organization at that time called Fashion Fights Poverty. And I used to be the VP of fashion production. So I would do all of the fashion shows. I was doing all the
design. Was that connected at all with Naomi's Fashion for Relief situation? Okay.
No, it was not. This was before. This was 2000. Yeah, so I started thinking.
Oh, wow. So this was before. 07. Wow. That was before Arise. That was before. Wow.
All of it. And at that time, Fashion Fights Poverty was founded by 3 Washingtonians. And they were focusing on eco and ethical fashion. So everything about FFP was about eco-ethical. And this was before sustainability was a thing. This was before any of that. And they had partnered with the I think it was the UNDP. The UN Foundation for one of their anniversaries. And so that's how it all kind of began. And so when I came back from Cynthia, I pitched them like, hey, like, I just came from Fashion Week. I can do your shows. I can produce events and all of this stuff. And they were like, bet, come on board. Why not? And so I was with FFP for 4 years. I was there from 2007 to 2011. And I produced all of the shows over the course of those 4, I was there 4 years, but 5 years worth of shows. And so I say all of that to you to say that energy in DC at that time was incredible and really fueled a lot of my energy around DC. And so I was really active in all things fashion in DC, again, because I couldn't move to New York because I didn't want to. And also... You know, and also I somebody had dropped some nuggets of wisdom on me at that time and said, do you want to be a big fish in a small pond or a small fish in a big pond? And I was like, you know what?
That is a word.
The whole word. And it changed my perspective. Like, rather than looking at DC as this, you know, ugly stepchild of New York, I started seeing it as the small pond that I could be a big fish in. And who are the players, and, you know, what are the things that I could do, and what relationships could I build, and, you know, how can I grow my business, and what did all of that mean? So that's how I really kind of got entrenched in the DC scene. And so I joined Fashion Group a couple years later. And then, you know, I met different people in the industry, and built really strong relationships. And so as opportunities would come up, people will call me for things. But between FFP and FGI, between Fashion Fights Poverty and FGI, plus all the things I did.
You're making me, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted, Elaine.
Listen. I wrote the fashion guide, like all of those things. I had an anonymous site that nobody knew was me for years called All Things Fashion DC. That was me. Yeah, that was me. You know, it's funny. If I knew influencer culture was going to be the next thing, I would have been trying to put my face all over it.
Back in the day when I was doing the Chic Incumbent blog, you know, covering fashion and politics, I started off completely anonymous because, I didn't want people to see my face and then just, come up with all these judgments and, misconceptions. And it's so interesting because it actually grew rather quickly when they had no idea, who I was. And then all of a sudden I'm like, surprise. And a few folks were like, hey, I didn't know this was you. I'm like, yes, I'm a Harper's Bazaar style ambassador. When they have their program, like it was really interesting to see. But I think that, with all the movements and, a push towards inclusivity and more uplifting diverse voices, that's less so now, which is good.
Yeah. I think yes and no. It's weird because I remember a time where, particularly in the beginning of social, beginning of Twitter and bloggers and influencers and that whole era, at the time, the way you gained respect in the industry was experience. It wasn't clout. It wasn't being an influencer.
Oh, absolutely. Blogger was a dirty word.
Like blogger, like, you're not it. You are not, what's the word I'm looking for? Recognized. You didn't do this the right way. Right. And so for me, I wasn't trying to be a blogger. I was trying to build a media empire. Like, for me, all things was really about, developing a platform that could house. I envisioned kind of the WWD of DC, right? And so that was really kind of the blueprint that I used. At our peak, I had 22 contributors writing. We were posting 2 to 3 posts a day. That's even how the fashion guide, the fashion source came along, because I built and I'd amassed all of these, all of this data around who was here. And so I really got entrenched locally for a really long period of time. And then in I would say the big shift happened for me out of DC in 2015. Was because I did, that's when I launched the book in 2015. After I got done with the fashion source,
and what is
I kind
the
of looked at
source?
everything I'd done in DC. So the fashion source was a guide. Hold on.
I have my copy. I have my copy.
Oh, you have?
I remember that part. That was a fabulous party. Yes, fabulous party. You had a fabulous dress on. It was very, it was very chic.
Thank you,
like,
thank
girl.
you. It's funny. I look at it now and I still
amazing.
Can't believe I did this. But when I would go to Fashion Week in London, I would find they give you these, and even in New York, but the one in London I really like the most. But they give you these little binders, and it had a directory of all the different fashion businesses and retailers and PR people, and I was like, we should have one in DC. Like, people don't know fashion is here, right? I was really big on advocacy and awareness. And I was a strong believer that the reason the DC fashion ecosystem hadn't fully grown was because people just didn't know. And so if only we would provide more information, because I'm a solutions oriented person. So rather than complain about what we don't have, I'm like, let me provide it. We need to know it's here. Let me do a film. We need to know it's here. Let me write a book. We need to know it's here. Let me provide a website. But after I did this in 2015, I kind of took a step back and felt like I had tapped out. I came to the realization that DC's fashion was primarily retail.
Yes.
We are a retail town, and not necessarily a fashion town. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because I was fully invested.
Everywhere.
Oh my gosh.
All in.
Fully invested. All in. And at that point, I decided that I wanted to really explore outside of DC. And I've been doing a few things internationally, particularly when I would go for Fashion Week, but nothing with full intentionality. And at the end of 2015, I got offered a job. Funny enough, on a whim, I went and I spoke on a panel at American University that the New Fashion Club had put together. This was in November of 2015. And they said to me, hey, we're pitching to our business school a fashion program, but there's just no one to teach it. to even create it, let alone teach it. And I said, well, I'll do it. And the student, he was president of the club, was like, really? He was like, do you mind if I tell the dean? And I said, please be my guest.
Wow.
Didn't think much of it. I got a call from the dean in January and said faculty had approved this new fashion program at Kogod School of Business on fashion and luxury goods. And they don't know where to begin. And so would I be interested? So I went in and I met up with them and they said, listen, this would involve you developing a curriculum, building a program. We've never had this before. We don't even know what this is. And oh, by the way, it's a travel class.
Full circle. Full circle.
Full circle. So we would like you to take said students, pick a capital, and partner with AU's Kogod's global program and take these kids out during spring break and taking them to meet brands and, give them that experiential learning, if you will. And so I said, sure, I can do that. Yeah. I can call this one and that one. And this was January. 2 weeks later, I got a contract.
Amazing.
And class was put on and class started the next month. So we had 4 weeks of class and then 2 weeks of travel. And so I had to pick up the phone. I had to leverage my relationships. I had to call and say, hey, can my students come? And then on top of that, I had to build a program from scratch that hadn't existed before. And so in 2016, 2016, we went to Paris.
Love Paris.
Took my students to Paris. Yep. And my daughter, I remember my daughter at the time was 2.
You took her.
She was 2.5. She hadn't even turned.
Oh my!
Took her with me.
As a mother of 2 toddlers, I'm just but I mean, Sage is like, she's just,
Sage was everything.
She had her outfits.
She was ready. She was like,
I love it.
And we're
oh my goodness.
It was everything. She was here for it. But it was, it was a challenging time just on a personal note. Also, at this point now I have children, or I had a child, and I'm trying to balance still being me and, wanting to live my dreams and all the things I was passionate about, but now having a baby and having a 2-year-old. And, I was grateful to my husband for being supportive enough to not just let me go, but let me take her, because at the time there was no way I was leaving her behind. And to really have his support and say, hey, I know you really want to do this. And so that, go ahead, and, I'm going to miss my baby too, but I get it. And, that type of thing was really, really, really great. But that trip in 2016 was my turning point in going international. Because at that point, it reminded me that the world was my oyster, that there was just so much more to the fashion industry than just DC. And I had spent, at this point, 7-8 years just with kind of tunnel vision. And I didn't want to do that anymore. And so in 2017, my program went to London. And that really was the change.
But I feel like you've been international since the beginning. When were you working on an African city? One of my favorite shows. Right. Literally, when I discovered it, was it a conversation with you? It may have been. I don't know how I discovered an African city. I'm going to put it in the show notes because I know the season 1 is free. And it just completely, I went down the rabbit hole of African fashion when I saw that show. All of the girls looked amazing. They each had their own personalities, and it was just like African. It changed my life, and that's how I discovered Christie Brown because of that show. But you, my friend, actually worked on that show. What was your role in that? And that was prior as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. This was 2011.
That's what I'm like.
Actually, just have to
Elaine,
look
you
it
have
up.
been international from the jump.
I mean, but I hadn't focused on it as a primary part of my business model, if you will. But yeah, partially because I was from the continent and because I traveled so much as a child, I always had relationships internationally. For whatever reason, I just committed so hard to DC for such a long period of time. But yeah, in 2011, the creator of An African City, Nicole, is a friend of mine. And she was here at the time. She was working at the World Bank, and, we would, meet up for lunch. And I remember we went to Founding Farmers by the bank. And she was like, Elaine, I've written this pilot and I want to shoot it. And it's the story. It's kind of like the African Sex in the City. And I remember us sitting down at lunch talking about it. And I was so excited. And she was talking about, considering moving back. And again, this was 2011. So it wasn't like there was a mass exodus necessarily. Year of the Return and all of this stuff that's happening now had not happened then. So it was a big risk for her. She was working at the World Bank, which is a prestigious place to work. And our fathers knew each other, and my father was at the World Bank at the time also. And so it just was like one of those things where it's like, you're at the perfect place, and this is what we go to college for. And we had a conversation about it, and she's like, I want to shoot a pilot. And I bet, let me know what you need, when you need, how you need. She's like, will you style this pilot for me? Absolutely. And I remember that was a brand,
chills.
and I have to look for them
because how much that show means to me.
I know. And it did a lot. It meant a lot to a lot of people. Arise had happened in 2008, 2009. And that was kind of the first big explosion, if you will, into African fashion really being a part of the luxury conversation. But I think An African City really helped elevate the idea that it could be modernized. It could be, it could be every day. And that this is how African women,
the diaspora,
across, the continent, dressed and looked and lived. And granted, it was about expats or not necessarily expats, but it's about, first generationers or returnees, if you will. But nonetheless, it gave a glimpse into kind of what fashion really could be and what that looked like. So yeah, in 2011, we shot the pilot here, actually, in DC. Originally, with the 5 actresses. Of them, only 2 of them actually ended up being main characters that stayed, and they recasted when the show went back to Ghana, or should I say went to Ghana to film, because they had to reshoot it. But yeah, we shot the pilot here. I saw it's closed from all over the place. There was one brand in particular called Boxing Kitten. I'll never forget. They did a patchwork skirt that I saw in 2011, and I was like, because in Ghana, we would do patchwork all the time and didn't think anything of it. And she was the first one. I need to look her up now. I don't even think she realizes how much she was impactful in this kind of shift. And she's, if I'm not mistaken, she's first generation as well. And or half, one of her parents was African, but she'd never been to Africa at that time anyway. But just was so influenced by the print and come up with this. And so, I styled that first shoot in 2011. And then Nicole moved to Ghana in 2012.
I'm going to put in the show notes. I'm putting in the show. One of the best shows ever.
We shot the show and everything. And it's funny, to this day, I still have the original character notes and all of the original pilot script and all of that stuff, because Nicole and I shared that stuff, so we knew
we need you to do another season. I'm putting it out there.
It was great. Yeah, and she's moved on now and doing bigger and better things.
I still love An African City, though.
In a while.
It's still one of my faves. Awesome. I would love to see season 3 or I don't know, An African City, the movie. Just putting it out there, Nicole. Just putting it out there. So you decide to open up your own showroom? What like?
Yeah. So
wait, like, so you're based here. I
know.
And then you're like,
something.
You know what? I'm gonna open up my showroom. What was the inspiration for that? And what has that process been like for you?
So I've always wanted to open a showroom. It's funny. I was looking through when I moved. I moved right before COVID in late 2019, and I found all of my old notebooks from when I started my business. And one of the things, my business used to be called Svelte, and then it was Brand Meets Creative, which Brand Meets Creative still exists, but now I have Showroom, etc., where we focus exclusively on African brands and fashion and luxury. But I remember when I moved, I found my old notebooks, and on one of them I had it was called a Svelte showroom. And I remember looking at it thinking, this has always been, I've always wanted to do this. I just, for one reason or the other, I would start and stop. I remember even one time collaborating with one of the founders from FFP, and was like, okay, maybe we should do the showroom together. And it wasn't this showroom that I'm doing now, but a showroom. And we even went and looked at spaces in DC and all of that. And it just kind of fell through, and I would put it on the back burner. So every year I do kind of like not a vision board, but I write down all the things that I want to accomplish. And every year since 2007, maybe, a showroom was on my list, and I would just push it to the back burner. Maybe not this year, maybe not that year. There are a few things on my list: a showroom, a restaurant. There are a couple things that sometime down the line, manufacturing.
So, and I know you got some ideas in terms of some recipes, y'all. She can cook. She can throw down.
Yeah, all of that stuff has been on my list, and I always knew I wanted to do it. I didn't know it's going to be what it is now. But the real impetus for Showroom, etc., was in 2019, really was for me. I went through like a major spiritual shift. I mean, I've always been religious, and I'm a Christian, and I've always been a Christian. We grow up that way, but I had a major spiritual shift where I completely withdrew from everything that I knew. And I felt it was really important for me to figure out, what does God want me to do? Like, how does he want me to live my life? And what is truly my purpose? Because I've done so many things and met so many people and had so many interactions, but I still felt like I was stagnant, like I wasn't moving forward, and I wasn't kind of doing the things that I needed to do. My business wasn't growing. And I just had a baby in 2018. And so I had some postpartum issues as well. And it was just like, 2019 was just like a crash of all of my worlds. And I just needed space. And I needed the ability to just really think and just be still and really figure out, like, what does God want for my life? And that was actually the year I got off of social. I think the last time I posted to my personal social account was December of 2019. And I decided that I watched the sermon series by Michael Todd called Planted, Not Buried. And it literally changed my life. And it changed how I viewed like life and my purpose and just my communication and interaction with God. And so I realized I was in a season of being planted, but I was looking at that from the lens of being buried, because being planted and being buried look the same, right? You go in it.
Yeah.
It up, right? And it looks the same. And if you don't have the right perspective, you will take your season of being planted and assume it's your season of being buried.
I am adding that to the show notes, and I think I will refer to that video this afternoon. Wow.
Yeah, it literally was. It changed my life, and it changed my life in more ways than one. I lost a lot of relationships and friendships in that year. Most really due to my account, right? Because I couldn't articulate why I needed the space. I just knew I couldn't do what I was doing before. I couldn't have the same relationships. I couldn't have the same conversations. I couldn't share kind of the thoughts and the plans and the goals, and because I was still trying to figure it out. And I really needed to detach, because what I had learned about myself in the years leading up to this was that I had slowly over the years developed a codependency on my tribe to validate my vision. And I needed to detach from said tribe to trust and hear my own voice again. And I can articulate it now, but at the time, I did not have the words. All I knew is I didn't want anybody else's opinion. I needed to be able to trust my gut again. I needed to be able to have an idea, execute it without calling 50 million people to say, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think?
Podcasts are awesome. And I know you love them too, or you wouldn't be here right now. But have you ever thought about starting your own? Don't worry, you don't have to be a techie, but you do need a bit of guidance so you don't make costly mistakes. My name is Sunny, and I've been podcasting for a long time. I've launched more than 15 profitable podcasts, and I'm the founder of the Independent Podcast Network. My online course, How to Launch Your Profitable Podcast in 30 Days, gives you the keys to the 5 Ps of podcasting, which is everything you need to launch and grow a successful podcast. You get unlimited access to more than 35 videos and dozens of handouts. And when you purchase my course, you're also supporting this awesome podcast because they're getting 50% of the money when you use their special link. How cool is that? Let me help you get started with your podcast. Go to podcastareawesome.com/fashion. That's podcastareawesome.com/fashion.
It's so funny you're bringing this up because I'm reading a book right now called You're Not Crazy, You're Just Codependent. And it talks about codependency, and not just in the way of like, hey, I need someone to, but just the different, even like subconscious ways that we view our own thoughts, and validation is a major part of it, but it goes beyond just like people. It can be like things, it can be, and it's so interesting. That's one of the things I've always admired about you. And it's so funny that you recognize that and you're like, oop, it's got to go, is that you've always focused on your goal. You've had the vision, and you weren't really concerned what people were doing in the industry or, here or there. It always seemed like you were in your own world. So even when you're like, hey, I'm not a fashion person, I'm like, yes, you are. Like I feel like it's either in you or it's not. No matter where you are, you could be here, you could be in Timbuktu, you could be in Wisconsin. If you're a fashion person, you're a fashion person. But, you were never that type to compare yourself or, just you've always had tunnel vision. So I think it's great that you were able to identify that and just be self-aware enough to say, hey, like, I got to clear out for a minute.
Yeah. I do. And, it's interesting. I don't have a large personal circle for that reason. But the people that are in my circle, I realize I've given them so much power.
Right.
And they didn't ask for it. So it's not anything they did, but I had literally turned over responsibility of my life to everybody else, to my husband, to my family, to my tribe, if they made the decision, then if it didn't work out, it's okay.
Oh, wow.
Right. If they made the decision, then they would steer me right, that I wouldn't make these mistakes. And really what I was living in is a cycle of fear.
That's so
and
deep.
Prior to that,
oh my God, my brain is so deep. Yeah.
The work, it's work because I really had to take ownership and stock of why I hadn't achieved the things I wanted to achieve, or why my business wasn't doing what I needed it to do, or, did I want to now be a stay-at-home mom and take care of my kids and just commit to that? Did I want to go back to corporate? Did I want to continue down this entrepreneurial path? Like, what was it for me? And in the midst of all of that, who is Elaine? You know, what are her boundaries? What does she like? What doesn't she like? And I was, you know, we had some family things as well. I just moved. It just was a lot. And it really required that time and space. And Showroom was birthed out of that time. It was birthed out of that time. I remember in 2019. So by the end of 2019, and then I went just on a physical journey. I was like, I have had baby weight on my body for
that baby weight.
Years.
It's no joke, y'all.
I hadn't to really get rid of because
I gained like 80 pounds, girl. You know, I know the struggle. 80 pounds, y'all.
It is real. And it's consistent. And I really was like, this was the year I was going to take responsibility for my life. Like, this is not a dress rehearsal.
Wow.
It's the only life I get. One time. That's it. And I'm a reflection to my children of how to live. Because my daughter had once said to me, she said, Mommy, I want to be just like you when I grow up. Right? Which is cute. Oh, she's like, yeah, I only want to stay home and watch my babies.
Oh my. Wow.
Right.
Not a bad thing.
That's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
That's your choice. But that wasn't my choice. That was my circumstance and my season by choice. But my drive and my energy and everything that I'd worked towards, I realized she had never seen me at my best or what I perceived to be my best. She had never seen me on the go. She had never seen me like working and doing all of these things and like about my business. She'd never seen that. She'd only seen the mommy me that was schlepping around, that hair was a mess, that, you know, didn't have it together, that was just barely making it, that was just going day by day and didn't care how I looked and didn't care how that's the only me she knew. And it was a light bulb for me. Like, I'm not living this life just for me anymore. I'm living this life now for her.
And
because
Joe,
she needs
shout
to
out
be
to
able
Joe.
to see.
I know.
At this point, Joe is,
I love Joe. Is the cutest, you guys. Like, they're both just adorable.
Joe wasn't on my radar yet. I mean, and he was a boy, and I don't know, for some reason, you know, the mirroring thing was really big for me. But yeah, really, that was it. That was really the real change, the light switch for me. And I knew, okay, that this was like 2018. This was like, we was right before we moved, and I realized, something's got to change. So by the time I got into 2019, I was fully there. At the end of 2019, typically, you know, the new year, new vision, all of this stuff. I'd never done a vision board before. And I thought, well, maybe I should do one. And so I can cut the whole affirmations thing and, you know, what you put out and all of that type of stuff. And I had an epiphany, which was that God had already given me so many things. Like, when I go back and I look at notes, ideas, businesses, things that he wanted me to do. In my own spiritual journey, I realized that I hadn't executed the things he'd already given me. You know? And so in 2020, I looked at my board, I literally took a sheet and I wrote down every idea that God had ever given me. And then I checked off the things that I had done. And then the things I hadn't done, I looked at it and I said, God, I am not going to ask you for anything new until I execute everything on this list. So instead of my year of 2020 being, you know, what's my vision? You know, what's my purpose? It's a new year. I'm like, my goal for 2020 is just execute what God gave me. It's the parable of the 5, the 2, and the 1. I'm like, when Jesus comes, I don't want God to say, what did you do with the 5 that I gave you? And me to say, or I should say, I want him to say, what did you do with the 5? And me to say, here's my 10, right? And ask the guy, what did you do with the 2? He says, here's my 4. I did not want to be the guy who had 1, and instead of bringing back 2, went and buried it. Because that's really what I was doing, was just burying the gifts that he'd given me. And I was like, I do not want my gifts taken away and given to the person who who had the 5 and the person who had the 2. So if all that meant was that I would have a PowerPoint slide up, I would put together a brand kit, I would map out a website, and nothing ever came of it, I can tell God, you gave it, here it is. That's how Showroom was birthed. In January of 2020, I literally felt in my spirit that God wanted me to do this. And I'm thinking, and I remember having this conversations with him saying, I mean, Dumfries. Like,
no, real talk. I mean, you're not in the fashion district in New York. You're not in Paris.
In Paris. Found the litany of everything I wasn't and everything I didn't have. And he was like, and? So I was like, okay. And then I dressed it up. Okay, like, I'm glad that you feel this way, but I don't know what you want me to do with that.
Yeah,
see, that's how I interpreted that. And so I brushed it off, didn't think much of it. And literally for like a couple weeks, it was like, are you going to do the showroom? Are you going to do the showroom? Now, mind you, in the midst of that, he dropped something else on my spirit. He said, how about you revisit Fashion Group? I was like, what? How would I?
Been there, done that. Yeah.
Been there, done that. I'm not doing that again. And then he was like, no, how about you do FGI Africa? Why don't you pitch them in FGI Africa? Right? And I was like,
yeah.
Because of that. So long story short, I reached out, I pitched it, they loved it. But you know, God does what he does for a reason, because the deck that I put together to pitch became the foundation of my why for Showroom.
Wow.
I didn't even realize at the time. Now, granted, FGI Africa didn't end up happening because, of course, COVID happened.
Can't do
everything, you know, kind of fell apart, and maybe we'll revisit it one day. So I don't even know if I can talk about it, but it is what
it's
it
out
is.
Here.
But I went forward with Showroom anyway. I built a 10-page deck that I look at it now and I cringe because it was so basic.
Girl, it's never basic with you. No.
I'm telling you, it looked pretty, but it literally was just the vision. And it was a reminder that when God says, you know, write the vision down and make it plain, that's really what they mean. Just write it down. It doesn't have to make sense to anybody else but you. And I started thinking about who would I want to represent and who do I want to work with and what would Showroom look like? And, you know, what services will we provide and what's doable in this season? And I created a database and I started like looking at different people, different brands, different info. I put them in different sections. And in March, I just started cold emailing. Hey, my name is Elaine, and, you know, I am a, brand strategist and luxury consultant. This is what I do, and I'm working on this project called Showroom, etc. And and I'd love to meet you. And of the first 20 or so I sent out, I got 5 responses back.
That's great.
Right? Which, from a percentage perspective, was great. And what I started doing was scheduling meetings. I would just schedule meetings, not to pitch them to be in Showroom, but to build relationships. One of the things that I believe is one of my biggest gifts is the ability to build relationships. I care more about relationships than money, because relationships to me are the currency that will last farther, longer, harder than any amount of money. And I'm also a big believer and a proponent of meeting people where they are and never assuming somebody's beneath you. Somebody's position is beneath you. Or like, you know, if I want to meet, I don't know, as an example, if I wanted to meet Anna Wintour, or I wanted to meet whoever, that her assistant is beneath me. Well, she's her assistant today.
That's right.
You don't know what she's going to be tomorrow. You know, so for me, relationship building on every level is extremely important. And I decided, well, here's COVID. I'm like, God, you wanted me to start the Showroom, which I have started. I have put myself out there, and COVID hits, and which means no travel, no meetings, no anything, no infrastructure, no physical showroom, none of that stuff. How's this going to work? And WhatsApp became my best friend, and I started reaching out and I started meeting people. And there was one brand in particular, which was Christie Brown, which I had loved and for years. And I knew the designer. I knew Aisha just, in social circles, we knew each other. So I knew where to go, but I loved and respected the brand so much that I only wanted to reach out to them when I knew I was fully ready. And so she was amongst the brands I reached out to, and I called her and we scheduled a time. We got on the phone and she was like, oh my gosh, perfect timing, because we're actually looking to expand into North America as well. And it would be great. And it just, the conversation went really well. And then I didn't hear from her for a while. And, again, I didn't think much of it. In the process, I actually signed on another client through a mutual friend. And at this point, showroom we started, we were going. And then I got a call from Aisha 2 days before her spring summer 2020 collection and says, hey, we're doing a virtual collection, a virtual launch of this collection. We want to have 5 or 6 people who intimately know the brand to come on our live and be a part of this conversation. Wow. Would you be willing to do it? It's like, absolutely. Mind you, I'd been planted, so I was gone. Like I hadn't been on social.
That was the unveiling.
I was like, gone, for a year. And I was really nervous because I didn't know if I was ready to come back yet, but I thought it's one live, I'll be on maybe 5 minutes. Maybe somebody will see me. Who's going to see me? Right. Almost everybody I knew in the industry who had some intersection with fashion.
Of course.
Hit me on a DM or on a tag.
Exactly.
And all of that. But I say all of this to you to say that showroom, I couldn't have anticipated what it has become in such a short period of time. I had a vision. I knew what God wanted me to do. I expected it to be way further down the line. I did not expect all that has happened and is happening with the brand or with the company to be what it is. When I started Showroom, it was really meant to represent brands in African fashion and luxury. What Showroom has now become is a full service agency and a multi-brand showroom that is dedicated to redefining how the world experiences African fashion.
Wow.
So it's not just anymore about the physical showroom. The showroom for us now is really, it's a mindset, not a place, right? If you think about it, the purposes of showrooms are to spotlight, to highlight, to showcase the best of who and what you are. So that's what we do at Showroom, etc. We highlight the best of who our brands are and the best of what they do. But we're not a physical place. So a lot of times people expect like an actual showroom.
It's a new day now. It's, with COVID, it's a new day. You got to figure it out. You got to figure something else out.
All the way. And it's been amazing working with the brands that we've worked with. But at the same time, it's also been amazing now for us to be a gateway and a conduit for corporations and for media entities to now connect to the continent as well. So now we're facilitating wardrobe and costuming for shows on like HBO. Listen, Ruth, if you hear this,
Ruth, are you calling Elaine?
But no, I am not.
I'm like, you better call me on the 3-way. I'll be quiet. I promise. But you're doing coming to America press. What's going on? Like, were some of your clients pulled for the movie?
Well, not for the movie, but for the
press tour.
Press tour.
I love
the press tour, but not for the movie. And it's really exciting. I think, what I'm finding, particularly as I'm dealing with more stylists, both the stylist side and the costume designer side, is they want, to work with African brands. A lot of them have just never experienced them before. And for Showroom, us being that conduit and us being stateside has been really helpful because they can get, pieces quickly and, they don't have to do international shipping and they don't have to do all the logistics that we deal with our clients. So it's been fun. And what I've loved too is that I've gotten to represent a plethora of brands in the entertainment space that I wouldn't probably have otherwise done had I been a traditional showroom and or a traditional agency. So we're kind of carving our own path. People ask me all the time, like, oh, you do PR? And I'm like, well, yeah, you could say that, but we're not publicity heavy shop. I mean, that's really not what we do. Like all of the publicity we provide for our clients have a direct financial return on that investment. So, we do clippings and stuff, of course. So like we did a recent shoot for a Vanity Fair cover that's coming up and, we do stuff like that. But the focus is really more for me, for showroom and for my clients. It's really about global brand growth. It's about scaling. It's about strategic partnerships. It's about collaborations. It's about allowing us to be a part of the mainstream. I am a big believer that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. So, of course, we're all Black everything because that's who we are. But I want to be a part of mainstream. Yes. I want my brands to be a part of mainstream. I want you to see them on everyday shows. So one of my brands is going to be coming up in The Good Doctor, which is a regular show about medical field, right? It has nothing to do with what you would consider to be a fashion show.
Why not?
But why not? Right? Because we do more than just the print.
I love it.
And the print is great, but there's just so much more and so much depth to the brands on the continent. So yeah, we do fashion, we do lifestyle, we do arts and culture. We work with some museums on some really interesting projects coming up.
Oh, you're busy.
Corporate brands.
Oh, you're busy.
Oh yeah, we're busy.
I'm like, well, thanks for taking my calls during the week, Elaine.
Oh my God, stop.
Your schedule is crazy. Oh my God. Well, this is a fashion moment and we ask all of our guests and I'm sure you have a million, but what is one of your favorite fashion moments of all time? It could be personal, something that you experienced growing up in your life, professional, or even something that you've witnessed and why?
My goodness. That is
something that had an impact where you were just inspired or it was just truly magical for you.
Yeah. I have to think about that. I have a few moments that have been really defining for me. But I'm trying to think, what would I say is
it could be one, moment? Like one of the many, but one that comes to mind for you.
I don't know. That's a harder question than I thought.
Fashion moment.
I thought about this in advance. It's a fashion moment. I should have known better.
I'm sorry. It's my bad. And John and Rebecca, we can snip this out a little bit. We can snip this out.
Yes, please. Just a little bit. No, the reason I say that is to say I feel like I'm going to hate the one I'm about to say because it's not really my moment or a moment. Well, no, it's not really my moment. It was just a moment, and it doesn't have to be the moment.
It's just like one of the many moments. Like, because I know there's so many, especially for fashion folks.
Oh, there are a few. I'm trying to
or just one that just comes to mind.
Well, okay, this one was pretty good. As I mentioned, I was with FGI for a long time. And one of the benefits about being with FGI was that we have these books. And every year it's a directory and it has everybody who's a member of FGI in the book. And the first year I was going to London for Fashion Week, I went through the book and I scrolled through and I reached out to almost everybody in the London, who was part of the London membership. And I introduced myself and I said I was coming to London for Fashion Week and I'd love to connect. And Of the people I reached out to, one person reached out to me who's still a dear friend to this day. His name is Morris Mullen, and he's the head of fashion and luxury for the London Evening Standard. And Morris reached out to me. He responded to my message and was like, oh my gosh, it'd be a pleasure to meet you when you come to London. We scheduled a date and a time to meet. And I was just so excited. Like, he responded to little old me, right? And I get to Somerset House. So Somerset House was the British Fashion Council just moved a couple weeks ago, but they were at Somerset House. So Somerset House was like the tents. And we agreed to meet at the front gates of Somerset House. 2011, I'll never forget. I get there, and fabulous man shows up, and Morris is Irish, I believe. So he has a British accent, but has a slightly like Irish twist. He's in a full length purple, I don't even know what to call it, coat. He had a brooch. His shoes were impeccable. His hair was together. He had his bag / at that time, bags weren't a thing, but it was a whole merch. Just now amazing. I walk up to him and he goes, Elaine, and he gives me the biggest, warmest hug. And it's like, so you may not know this, but I'm also on the board of a British Fashion Council. And I happened to let them know that you were coming to town. So here's every fashion show ticket. Fashion Week. And you will be my personal escort for the week. But that's only if that's okay with you. Like, I hope I didn't overstep.
Oh my God. Wait, why did I get like a visual of him being like the fashion, like a fashionably chic Willy Wonka showing you like the factory, like taking you in. Yes. And then pure imagination is just going off in my head. Like when you walked in, if you want to view paradise,
it was that and everything.
Wow.
And he's literally one of my dearest friends in the fashion industry, even to this day. But he was like, Americans never come here. Like, you're one of the few people that ever reached out.
Wow.
I was like, really?
Yeah.
I refuse to believe that. He's like, yeah. It's always like
Paris,
New York,
Milan,
and then Paris, Milan, and then London, right? And so, whereas I love London. London Fashion Week is literally one of my favorites because the focus is really on the craftsmanship and the design. And when I say he took me under his wing for the week, we went to every show. We were, he would introduce me to people. He was like, oh, this is a
I love it. Oh my goodness. Was it not the chicest intro you've ever heard?
It was amazing. And actually that's where, the politics of fashion was born, because we were sitting at lunch in between one of the shows, and I was looking through this magazine, and it was a little itty bitty column that said fashion films were fashion's new frontier. And I had a light bulb because I was talking to him about DC fashion and what was relevant and all of this stuff. And I was like, we don't have that. This would be the time to document that. So yeah, that's probably one of my definitely on my top 10, if not top 5 fashion moments, because it really redefined for me my position in the fashion industry and my desire to really kind of build and grow. And it was a pivotal kind of turning point for me. And when I decided to go back international, of course, Morris was the first one I called. And every time I go to London, we get together. And when he came to DC to visit for the first time. And I took him around. I was pregnant with Joe. And I took him around DC for the first time. We spent 2 days together and just went around.
Gallivanting around Georgetown.
Yeah, listen, it's not London. I told him, I was like, this is London. But yeah, that was probably that moment of walking up to him at the front of Somerset House and him just embracing me and then just handing me all of these invitations to all of these shows. And it's like, you'll be my plus one. You'll be my guest for the week. Is that okay?
On my list post pandemic to check out London. Okay, London, you are on the list, London.
It's a must. It is a must.
Wow.
One of my favorite cities.
Yeah, I've only been there a couple of times. And yeah, so much has changed. So I definitely need to revisit. That is amazing.
I can't wait to go back. I can't wait for COVID to be over. I need to hop on a plane like yesterday.
None of us are going to be home after this is over. I mean, it's just...
No, I think the travel industry.
Yeah, I hope y'all are getting ready because the phones are going to be off the hook. But Elaine, you are such a treasure. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, and you're always welcome back, obviously. And I'm just so excited to see like everything that's basically happening and going to happen for Showroom, etc., and all of your other projects. I mean, who knows? Who knows what next month, next year? I mean, who knows with you? There's always something amazing. So thank you for being so open and transparent with us and sharing.
Thank you so much for having me. And I just want to say I'm so proud of you for just stepping out and, launching a fashion moment. It's not easy to kind of take a thought and just, really execute it. And I'm so super proud of you. And I am honored to be on here because, as I said to you, I was a fashion moment OG. Thank you very much.
Once a fashion OG, always a fashion OG. It's beyond this show. Beyond this show.
I am a fashion moment.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, Elaine.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thanks so much for joining me for this week of A Fashion Moment. If you like what you hear, we'd love for you to join our community of listeners and spread the word about the show. We also want to hear from you. Share your favorite fashion moments and dream guests with us by sending an audio clip or email to afashionmomentpodcast@gmail.com. Or you can tag us on Instagram at A Fashion Moment, and you could be featured on next week's episode. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review and let us know what you think. Until then, see you next time for another fashion moment. Podcast production by Rebecca Rashid and John Taylor Williams. Digital media production by Megan Porras.
This recording carries a Creative Commons 4.0 international license. Thanks to Patrick Patricios for their song, Hot Coffee.